Crossing the border into the United States has long been an effort of the illegal immigrants for decades, but it wasn't until recently when millions of them started pouring in over the last few years. In this video, we will look into how it all started.
Biden administration says it will grant nearly 500,000 Venezuelan migrants temporary protected status, giving them the ability to live and work in the U.S. legally for 18 months.
The new policies implemented by the Trump administration that changed rules around immigration, moving in, and settling in the U.S. How it all started.
We are going to build a great border wall to stop illegal immigration.
Back in 1924, the U.S. Border Patrol was born, not out of some grand plan, but because things were getting messy. The Chinese Exclusion Act had already set the tone, and after World War I and the Mexican Revolution, unauthorized crossings were on the rise. Then came Prohibition, turning the borders into highways for smugglers running booze and narcotics from Mexico and Canada. The government needed a line of defense, so they rolled out the Border Patrol to keep things in check. Fast forward to today, and the border game has evolved.
Normally, walking into Mexico is just like walking into a Walmart.
But on Thursday, when they got to the point of entry in Yuma, that wasn't the case.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, now leads the charge, keeping an eye on everything from land crossings to air and sea entries.
The line was very, very long. Most of the people in line didn't know what was going on. The only progress that we made in that line were people that were leaving.
ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, handles the heavy lifting inside the country, tracking down and deporting those who slip through. And let's not forget the Coast Guard, patrolling the waters to intercept smugglers and unauthorized vessels before they even reach the shore. Together, these agencies form a tight net, aiming to manage the complex and ever-changing landscape of U.S. border security. Since its formation, the mission of the U.S. Border Patrol hasn't stayed the same. It's shifted depending on who's sitting in the Oval Office. Under President Joe Biden, 2021-2024, the tone changed drastically. His administration leaned into what they called a more compassionate approach.
I would in fact make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
That meant undoing a lot of Trump-era restrictions, like halting the border wall construction and trying to end Title 42, which allowed rapid expulsions during the pandemic. There was more focus on pathways to legal immigration, temporary protections, and reuniting separated families. It sounded good on paper, but the system got overwhelmed fast.
Now, this comes as the daily number of illegal border crossings soared to just over 8,000 this week. Homeless shelters in El Paso are even having a hard time keeping up.
Now, rewind to January 2017. What did Trump do to avoid illegal migrants?
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility.
Well, the border turned into a zero-tolerance zone overnight. He ramped up deportations, rolled out Remain in Mexico, pushed hard on the wall, and made it clear in his speeches. We are going to build a great border wall to stop the invasion of illegal immigrants.
We are going to build a great border wall to stop illegal immigration, to stop the gangs and the violence, and to stop the drugs from pouring into our communities.
That line wasn't just a promise, it was a policy shift. ICE raids increased, asylum became harder to claim, and the southern border became a tight funnel. Trump's whole approach was about deterrence. Make it so tough that people think twice before even trying to cross. And for a while, it definitely slowed things down. Right after the announcement of building a wall along the whole border, mixed reactions came from the public. Some were favoring the decision, while most of, especially on the border side, were opposing it.
We live in the frontier. A lot of people from Mexico, they crossing over here, then they spend money.
My husband got deported in January, so we're in process. It's unfortunately for us, but it had to happen.
After Trump took office in 2017, he wasted no time in launching a full-blown crackdown on undocumented migrants. On his very first full day, border agents arrested 308 individuals, signaling the aggressive stance his administration would take on immigration enforcement.
Are you, the Department of Homeland Security, considering a new initiative that would separate children from their parents if they try to enter the United States illegally?
I am considering
exactly that.
One of the most controversial policies was the zero-tolerance approach, which led to the separation of thousands of children from their parents at the border. Families were torn apart, with children placed in detention centers while parents faced prosecution.
That policy and that separation of parents and children that is going to cause extreme trauma to people who are already extremely vulnerable and who've experienced persecution in their country of origin.
In 2019, ICE conducted one of the largest workplace raids in a decade, arresting 680 workers at food processing plants in Mississippi. These raids targeted undocumented workers, many of whom had lived in the U.S. for years. The administration also implemented the Remain in Mexico policy.
The Department of Homeland Security has begun to implement what is really a sweeping transformation in the way that asylum seekers are processed at the border,
forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their cases were processed. This led to overcrowded and unsafe conditions in border towns, with many migrants facing violence and exploitation.
I cannot overstate the significance of these developments. We are taking lawful, unilateral action to stop illegal entry now.
A lot of people were upset with these policies, and there were plenty of protests. Eventually, Trump chose to scrap the family separation policy, but other rules were still in place.
And by the way, today I signed an executive order. We're going to keep families together, but the border is going to be just as tough as it's been.
Then President Biden took office in 2021, and he immediately reversed many of Trump's hardline immigration policies, halting the border wall, ending family separations, and suspending the Remain in Mexico rule.
I would in fact make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are.
While it was seen as a humanitarian shift, the sudden policy vacuum created an opportunity.
Happened at the Paso del Norte Bridge in El Paso, Texas. Now this connects El Paso to Ciudad Juarez. CBP says that they deployed physical barriers to stop this attempted mass entry into the United States.
Illegal substance cartels and human smuggling mafias quickly exploited the loosened protocols, using social media to mislead migrants with promises of easy entry.
Today about a deadly crash on I-10 and was lightly linked to human smuggling.
Yeah, DPS now telling us an 18-year-old has been arrested in connection to the incident.
Border Patrol agents saw a spike in illegal crossings, overwhelmed detention centers, and an increase in cartel-led trafficking operations.
Mexico. Todos a Mexico? Everybody's from Mexico.
DHS flagged a rise in encounters with previously deported criminals and fentanyl smugglers. What started as a policy of compassion quickly spiraled into a logistical nightmare. Even frontline agents admitted they were drowning in the chaos, with record numbers of migrants slipping through the cracks. The border didn't open, but it definitely cracked. And just after President Biden lifted several Trump-era restrictions, a massive influx of migrants surged toward the southern border, overwhelming U.S.
Crisis caught on camera. Migrants running right past officers. This video shows 4 of the men getting captured by Border Patrol.
In 2021, the border crisis escalated to shocking levels, captured vividly on camera. A group of 7 migrants was seen darting out from thick brush in Texas, attempting to outrun Border Patrol officers in broad daylight. While 4 of them were quickly apprehended, the scene reflected a growing trend: desperate crossings and overwhelmed agents. Just moments later, over 200 more migrants voluntarily surrendered near the same area, highlighting the sheer volume of illegal entry. The footage became symbolic of a broken system, one where border enforcement was stretched thin and chaotic encounters were becoming the new normal.
This video shows 4 of the men getting captured by Border Patrol. More than 200 migrants surrendered to agents near the same location on Monday.
Another incident captured on video shows dozens of migrants in Tijuana sprinting through an open section of border fencing at Friendship Park. An area once heavily monitored. The footage, which quickly went viral, symbolized the unraveling control at the US-Mexico border. Gates meant to be secure were left wide open, and agents on the ground were powerless to stop the wave of crossing. Border agents described the moment as a total breakdown, and on the places where they couldn't run like this, they were using other means. In a shocking display of desperation, 4 migrants were discovered crammed into vehicles attempting to cross the border. One was astonishingly found inside a car's glove box. The others were hidden in similarly perilous spots, including the bottom of a lorry. 2 men, aged 20 and 21, had to be stabilized by medics after suffering from asphyxiation, joint pain, and severe disorientation. Among the group was also a girl. Authorities uncovered all 4 within hours. It was an alarming reminder of the extreme risks migrants were willing to take for a chance at a new life.
Meantime, at the southern border, authorities in Texas are working to break down a long tunnel used by cartels to smuggle migrants here into the U.S.
Migrants weren't only hiding in cars and running in plain sight, they started using tunnels. In 2023, authorities made a chilling discovery beneath a quiet home near San Diego. A highly engineered smuggling tunnel stretching hundreds of feet beneath the U.S.-Mexico border. Hidden beneath a trapdoor in a garage, the tunnel was reinforced with concrete, rigged with air ventilation, and even fitted with a rail system, clearly designed for high-volume trafficking. It was part of a growing trend. Nearly 200 such tunnels have been discovered, many connected to Mexico's notorious Sinaloa cartel. These weren't just escape routes, they were fully operational smuggling highways. Some were so advanced, they're virtually undetectable until they're abandoned or collapse. In one case, a family lived unknowingly atop a tunnel while tons of dirt were removed right beneath their backyard. With outdated tech and limited manpower, Border Patrol agents admitted they couldn't keep up. The new frontier of illegal entry wasn't just at the gates, it was far below them.
There's only one way to find out its entry. So basically the technology that exists today is the same that existed 50 years ago when dealing with tunnels.
One of us who can fit would go in there, typically without anything on, just a pistol and a flashlight.
And hope he doesn't find someone else in there.
As Biden's time in office was wrapping up and it started to look like Trump might make a comeback, panic washed over migrant communities. Hundreds of migrants in Mexico joined together in a caravan, shouting, "We are not criminals," as they hurried to the U.S. border.
A caravan of migrants chanting, "We are not criminals," is rushing to make it to the U.S.-Mexico border before the Trump administration is sworn in.
Desperate to get across before Trump's strict immigration policies kicked in again, many were carrying their stuff on their backs, anxious about what was to come. Trump's promises to deport millions, get rid of the CBP-1 app, and place tariffs on Mexico only added to the fear. For a lot of them, going back home felt like doom. As one Venezuelan guy put it, the caravan had started with 3,000 people, but shrunk down by half by the time they reached the border. With Trump openly threatening to end programs with no clear timelines, migrants were now not only scared of being turned away, but also worried about losing their last legal chances for safety. And then it comes.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes.
And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
After years of mounting frustration over the border crisis, President Biden's more lenient immigration approach created a storm of criticism. Uncontrolled crossings surged, detention centers overflowed, and criminal re-entry spiked. This chaos became political fuel. Donald Trump seized the moment during his 2024 campaign, calling out what he labeled the border betrayal.
America can succeed unless we stop the illegal immigrant invasion, the worst that's ever been seen anywhere in the world. There's never been an invasion like this anywhere.
His rallies echoed with a revived and sharper version of Make America Great Again, this time with a laser focus on securing the southern border.
We will make America powerful again. We will make America wealthy again.
After Trump's re-election in November, panic hit the migrant caravans heading to the U.S. border.
Hundreds of migrants are abandoning their journey towards the United States. The caravan, which began earlier this week with around 3,000 migrants, has now dwindled to just half.
What started as a group of 3,000 quickly shrank to half. Many migrants, especially from Venezuela, were really scared. Going back home meant facing serious danger, but moving forward seemed hopeless.
Donald Trump doesn't like Latinos. Donald Trump said he was going to remove all Latinos from the United States, a massive deportation. So now it's going to be harder to get in.
Trump's win brought back worries about mass deportations, the end of Biden's protections, and tougher border rules. His plans to build more walls, hire 10,000 agents, and kick out all undocumented immigrants crushed their hopes.
Needs help and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason.
With so much uncertainty and policies about to change, a lot of people decided to turn back, feeling like their last chance at safety was gone before they even got close to the border. And then Trump came to the office.
Next is an executive order minimizing the economic burden of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act pending repeal.
The moment Donald Trump stepped back into the Oval Office in 2025, he wasted no time. Within days, bold executive orders were signed targeting undocumented immigrants and visa overstays. Mass deportations kicked off almost immediately, with ICE operations ramping up across sanctuary cities and border towns. And just like that, the migrant hunt began. The moment Trump stepped back into office, things changed fast, like overnight. On the third day of Trump, the US shut down its online asylum system without warning.
The message that appeared through the app here through Ulysses, it says existing appointments scheduled through CBP1 are no longer valid. So that's it, that's the end of it.
Migrants who waited months for appointments suddenly saw messages saying their spot was canceled. Imagine selling your house, your car, walking for weeks only to be told, sorry, not today, not ever. Troops moved to the border, barriers went up, and a new order labeled undocumented migrants as invaders. That one word meant they could be turned away. No asylum, no questions.
If they want to voluntarily return to their countries, there are mechanisms that exist.
Mexico offered to help migrants go back home, but for many, there's nothing to return to. Deportations began immediately. Even workers from US farms were picked up. It felt like the border wasn't just closed, it was slammed shut with a loud thud.
Hearing from Immigration and Customs Enforcement about a video going viral on social media.
The video is raising concerns about the conditions at Rome Detention Center, and Local 10's Andrew Perez is in West Miami-Dade with reaction.
Detention centers filled rapidly and flights carrying deportees began leaving US soil daily. Trump reinstated fast-track removals, expanded 287G programs with local law enforcement, and empowered Border Patrol with broader authority. Entire communities began emptying out as people, some who'd lived in the US for years, were sent back to their countries. And that's not it. There are hundreds of videos where authorities are throwing away these aliens.
Some have been there for more than a month, he says, not communicating with anyone, still just waiting to be processed. Others are sick, he continues as he pans around the room.
Thousands of Salvadorans, many who had lived in the US for over a decade, were rounded up and flown out. Fast. ICE operations ran almost like clockwork. Dawn raids, tight coordination, and barely any time to pack up a life. Entire neighborhoods felt like ghost towns overnight. The administration pushed a hardline message: no papers, no stay. Once they landed in El Salvador, many faced violence or had no homes to return to. It wasn't just deportation, it was exile. The message was loud and clear: no exceptions, no sympathy. And that's when all hell broke out, starting with the mass deportation to deporting other individuals like gang members.
It's a bad group when you look at them and you look at the crimes that they've committed. You think, you don't get any tougher, you don't get worse than that.
In February 2025, President Trump ramped up his crackdown on organized crime with a high-profile deportation of over 200 alleged Venezuelan gang members. Deemed national security threats, the individuals were swiftly flown to El Salvador, where they were marched into the country's infamous terrorism confinement center, a fortress-like mega prison capable of holding 40,000 inmates. Trump authorized the deportation under the rarely used 1798 Alien Enemies Act, bypassing standard legal procedures. The move led to immediate legal backlash. A federal judge paused the order for 14 days, ruling that the act was intended for wartime threats from foreign nations, not for undocumented individuals linked to criminal syndicates. Meanwhile, Venezuela's government condemned the action, denying affiliation with the accused gang members. And that's not it. Right after he initiated his policies, things got intense, fast. Within weeks, the US launched one of the most aggressive deportation campaigns in recent history. The first major wave hit Haiti, where deportation flights began landing with migrants who had been living in the US for months. But what raised the most eyebrows? El Salvador stepping in and offering to house deportees, including violent criminals and even some US citizens, in its infamous mega prison that can cram in up to 40,000 inmates. The US Secretary of State even called the deal unprecedented. Then came the shocker. The first US military flight carrying migrants to Guantanamo Bay landed in Cuba. Yeah, that Guantanamo. The message from the Trump administration was loud, harsh, and crystal clear. No more waiting, no more leniency. The gloves were off.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called it the most unprecedented and extraordinary migration agreement anywhere in the world.
Migrant farm workers across California have been living in constant fear. ICE raids have ramped up, and hundreds of workers, many undocumented but vital to the farming economy, have been detained or deported.
I felt fear, so much so that I didn't leave my house to work for 3 days. I have a 5-year-old son, and since they were picking up a lot of farm workers, I thought if I encounter that, what about my son?
These are the same people who during the pandemic were called essential. Now they're treated like liabilities. Then came the troops.
Actions President Trump took was announcing that he'd be using active U.S. troops to help improve security on our southern border.
1,600 active duty soldiers deployed to the southern border. Trump even called in Navy destroyers like the U.S. Spruance and Gravely to boost border operations.
The federal government is sending more military resources to the border, including a Navy warship. Experts say it's a show of force amid low illegal crossing numbers.
Yeah, actual warships. While many farmers stayed quiet, too scared to speak out, the message was clear. Enforcement was going to be tight, fast, and merciless.
Resources would, sort of serve as a deterrent mechanism for people who may be considering migrating.
At the Chrome Detention Center in West Miami-Dade, a viral video has exposed disturbing conditions. Men packed tightly together, sleeping on floors and under chairs, some using masks to cover their faces or block the light.
So this is all happening in the context of the Department of Homeland Security working to expand the capacity of how many immigrants they can have. What we're about to see here is very real.
The facility, designed to hold around 500 people, is reportedly housing over 1,700 detainees. Migrants claim they've been kept for weeks without phone access, raising major concerns about overcrowding and human rights. Immigration attorneys confirm the chaos as ICE struggles to keep pace with Trump's rapid deportation orders. With limited resources and growing numbers, the system appears to be buckling under its own weight.
Detention facility that is suitable to bed about 500 bed spaces. Last known figures based on reports and also communicating with other attorneys has between 1,700 to 1,800 people.
In March 2025, the migration numbers dropped hard.
They say migration to the U.S. has significantly slowed. The Department of Homeland Security is also reporting apprehensions have slowed.
With new executive orders cutting off nearly all asylum options, many migrants who had made it all the way to Mexico were suddenly stuck. The asylum app was gone, rules were tighter, and fear of deportation was everywhere. People who had walked through jungles, crossed rivers, and risked everything now saw no way forward. Thousands gave up and started heading back on foot. This reverse migration meant returning to countries like Venezuela and Colombia, where danger still waited. It wasn't because they wanted to leave, it was because they felt they had no choice.
Got people from, let's say, Venezuela, Colombia, the two biggest emigration hotspots over the last few years, coming all the way to Mexico and essentially now looking around at the landscape and saying, you know what, it's not worth it to stay here. I don't want to run the risk of deportation. I know the Trump administration is not going to let me in. Therefore, they're making the very difficult decision to return home.
And then there come the controversial cases. Like immigrant students and scholars have been getting swept up in one of the most aggressive detention waves in years. It's not just about border crossings anymore. International students with valid visas are being picked up.
On Tuesday, federal immigration authorities detained Tufts PhD student Mesa Öztürk, who is a Turkish national here on a valid visa, according to her attorney, and took her into ICE custody.
Especially if they've been spotted at any kind of campus protests. Many are quietly transferred to remote detention centers where legal help is nearly impossible to find. One case hit especially hard. Rumeysa Ozturk, a PhD student at Tufts University, was walking down a Somerville sidewalk when plainclothes agents surrounded and detained her. She had a valid student visa, no criminal record, and wasn't even a leading voice in the protests she attended.
Those who know Ozturk told the Globe that she wasn't necessarily a leader of campus activism at Tufts, though she did support Palestinian human rights.
Her arrest shocked professors and advocates alike. She was locked up in ICE custody without clear charges. Now her legal team is fighting to bring her back and demanding answers no one's giving.
Massachusetts Ozturk's attorney says she's not aware of any charges. The judge's order gives the federal government until Friday to explain why Ozturk is being detained.
Trump's renewed mass deportation policies have sparked significant backlash, both domestically and internationally. The re-implementation of family separation policies has led to emotional distress among affected families and criticism from human rights organizations. As ICE raids intensified and fear gripped immigrant communities, entire industries began to feel the pressure. Agriculture, construction, and service sectors, heavily reliant on undocumented labor, faced worker shortages that couldn't be filled overnight. Crops went unharvested, projects stalled, and small businesses struggled to stay afloat. At the same time, international backlash mounted. Nations criticized the administration's hardline stance, with some countries refusing to accept deportees, further straining diplomatic ties. Domestically, economists warned that mass deportations would shrink the labor force and reduce GDP. Families were left broken, and children, many U.S. citizens, were forced into foster care or left behind. What began as a political move soon exposed a deeper truth. Targeting undocumented immigrants didn't just reshape immigration policy, it disrupted lives, economies, and America's image on the world stage.
But some are questioning whether the use of military aircraft is necessary, since the U.S. has been using passenger planes like these for years to deport migrants.
President Trump's aggressive deportation policies have led to significant labor shortages in states with large immigrant populations, including California, Texas, and New York. Industries such as agriculture, construction, and services are particularly affected. In Texas, for example, nearly 60% of the construction workforce was undocumented as of 2022. Mass deportations could result in the loss of half the labor force in this sector, severely impacting housing and infrastructure projects.
Many people braved the cold to protest Donald Trump's plan for mass deportation of migrants. As Sade Gray tells us tonight, they want to send a message not only to the president-elect, but to local leaders as well.
Similarly, in California, a huge chunk of farm workers, about 75%, are undocumented, and it's causing some serious problems in the agricultural scene. We're starting to see labor shortages that are driving up costs and causing delays in food production across the board. Plus, people are starting to hit the streets to show they're not happy about it. Economists are increasingly alarmed by the potential repercussions of President Trump's stringent immigration and trade policies.
Organizers say they will hold another massive protest January 20th at the Federal Plaza. From there, they plan to march to the Trump Tower.
The sharp reduction in immigration is already causing labor shortages in key sectors like agriculture and construction, leading to increased labor costs and production delays.
Denounce the submitted amendment to the Welcoming City Ordinance as a racist attack on our immigrant co-workers, families, and neighbors.
Additionally, the administration's aggressive tariff strategy is exacerbating economic uncertainties. For instance, new tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China are disrupting supply chains and increasing consumer prices.
China, 67%. European Union, 39%. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%.
The Tax Foundation thinks that these tariffs could increase taxes by about $830 for each U.S. household in 2025. Economists are pointing out that these kinds of policies might slow down the economy, with estimates showing a potential GDP drop of 0.1% to 0.4% in 2025, which would mean a hit of $30 to $110 billion. To make things more complicated, President Trump recently rolled out major tariffs on almost all imported goods, aiming to cut the U.S. trade deficit and give domestic manufacturing a boost.
We are following the breaking news of President Trump threatening to slap China with additional tariffs.
The trade war between the U.S. and China just got a lot more intense after President Trump slapped a huge 145% tariff on Chinese goods. China hit back with a 125% tariff on US imports, focusing on areas like energy and agriculture. This back and forth has messed up global supply chains, causing companies like Boeing to lose orders from Chinese airlines because of the rising costs. The International Monetary Fund warns that these measures could weaken global economic growth and increase inflation. As both nations continue to impose tariffs, the global economy faces heightened uncertainty and potential downturns.
You wouldn't drop tariffs on China unilaterally, that you would need to see some kind of movement. What do you want to see from China?
Well, I'm not going to drop them unless they give us something that's, substantial. Otherwise, I'm not going to drop them, but it'll all work out. Those things always work.
Now, seeing all this situation, President Trump's time in office has been filled with uncertainty and tension. Migrants are dealing with a pretty unpredictable situation, with tough immigration rules shaking up their lives and plans. At the same time, the trade war between the US and China is heating up, with tariffs flying back and forth, putting a strain on global economic relations. It's hard to say how all these policies will play out in the long run, and we'll just have to wait and see their full effects both at home and around the world.